Pokemon Nuzlocke. As someone who loves Pokemon and has way too much free time on their hands, I personally have plunged deep into the Nuzlocking scene over the last couple of years. I've completed hardcore deathless runs of all these vanilla Pokemon games, but I've always had a fascination with randomizers spicing things up. Unfortunately, doing randomized Nuzlocks typically is too easy when you get busted Pokemon left and right to fill your team with. So in order to balance the game out and bring in an extra level of challenge, I decided to drag 2 of my family members in to help me do an Ultra Sun randomized hardcore Soul Link. I mean, how hard could it really be, right?
No.
No,
and it can just meme recover every... Oh, wow, this thing is absolutely a god. Wow.
Yep. I'm
Jesus Christ! I don't think Bullet Seed's even...
Because if you die,
Yeah, I... Thrash is...
Goodbye, everybody.
Yeah,
it crit anyway. GG.
Woo!
And we're dead.
That's the second run that's died to the freaking teacher. Let's go! Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh, and it got... Oh, Lord!
You're kidding. The Omniboost?
An Omniboost?
You can't
lower speed. Hope he uses Leer again. Lower speed again. Get the speed. Do it again. Quick! Oh, it's Joe.
No, I can't. Tropius.
He has all 5 pieces of Exodia.
Tropius, please.
Come on, just somehow outspeed.
Waterfall.
Quick Claw.
Yeah, Waterfall.
Outspeed. No flinch.
What?
Do it. Do it again.
Yo.
Waterfalling. Goodbye.
Yeah, so 3 attempts in, and we hadn't even gotten past the first captain fight. That brings us to the run I'm going to highlight in this video. Attempt 4. The rules for this attempt, along with all the other attempts, is listed in the description below. I'll point out certain rules as they come into play. But 2 things I want to point out are that the first level cap will be set at 15, just to prevent early game overleveling and resets. All other level caps will be set at the next Totem or Kahuna's Ace Pokemon. The other is that we're not using the rule that bans the use of multiple Pokemon of the same primary type that most Soul Links use. We just simply don't like that rule at all, so we chose to exclude it. This attempt starts with us selecting our starters.
Let's do it. 3, 2, 1, go.
I got...
Oh my
Palkia.
Our first link becomes my Magearna, Rachel's Palkia, and Dan's Umbreon. After a lengthy bunch of cutscenes and fights, we finally get Pokeballs and the run officially begins. We skip the first encounter on this route since that one is always a static level 4 Pokemon, and since all statics are randomized so that non-legendaries remain non-legendary, we felt it would be better for the first encounter to be a truly random Pokemon. So we end up getting Chandelure, Reuniclus, and Hawlucha. Actually pretty good for a first encounter. After beating the rival again, we get our Route 1 Outskirts encounter. Side note, we count Route 1 Outskirts and Trainer School as their own encounters, despite the game grouping them all under Route 1. Otherwise, we'd only have 2 Pokemon at this point in the game, and that's pretty lame. So from Route 1 Outskirts, we get Tynamo, Tyrantrum, and Swallow. We move on to Trainer School for that encounter and prepare to fight Teacher Emily, who at this point has already defeated us in 2 other attempts. Magearna easily beats Tropius and Hawlucha avoids getting confused and 2 shots Gallade. Rachel, on the other hand, goes up against a Reshiram of all things. Who knows Dragon Rage? However, Teacher Emily seems to use Smart AI, and I had an interesting experience in another randomized run where an Aggron transformed into my Regigigas. The Smart AI should have clicked Crush Grip to do the most damage to me, but it clicked Fire Punch instead. Similarly, in a vanilla run, I fought Olivia's Armaldo with my Forretress, fully expecting it to click Rock Blast against me, but it clicked X-Scissor instead. So it seems that Smart AI doesn't click the move that does the most overall damage, but rather the move that has the highest effective base power, which leads me to throw out a theory. Now, I don't honestly know how the AI will handle this, because normally they pick the move that does the most damage, but they typically don't read moves that do fixed damage
correctly. They might just see its indeterminate amount of damage and not click it, hopefully. Reshiram decides to use Imprison on turn 1, which means next turn it's going to attack no matter what.
You gotta do it.
Stop.
No. Just stomp.
No.
Oh, he fires back.
Okay. I don't know if he's reading it right, because this is smart AI. They might not know that Dragon Rage kills.
Thankfully, my prediction is correct, and it misreads Dragon Rage's damage and allows Tyrantrum to slowly chip away at its health until it's dead. We make our way to the city where we get another encounter in which Rachel's Machoke winds up getting Fur Coat as an ability, and prepare to take on the person who ended our run last attempt, Alima. Alima is particularly scary because his Pokemon are actually EV trained. Thankfully, none of his Pokemon end up being too powerful, and we all get through the fight unscathed. We get 3 new encounters from Route 2, Sandy Cave, and Howoli Cemetery, and our team going into the first totem is slowly coming together. We enter the first totem trial and easily handle the trial Pokemon. With that out of the way, it's time to fight the totem Pokemon itself. Rachel gets Totem Ducklet, Dan gets Totem Rattata, and I get Totem Mega Tyranitar. Magearna matches up extremely well here, but I don't have a great way to hit Tyranitar back, so I end up defeating the Summon Zangoose first, then getting rid of the Screech debuffs and scoring the kill with Sonic Boom. Rachel's Totem Ducklet ends up surviving the first turn and summons Mega Rayquaza. Palkia is able to outspeed and one-shot it, and finishes off Ducklet the next turn. Dan has the perfect Pokemon on the field to one-shot Rattata, but goes for Wing Attack instead of Karate Chop. Rattata lives and summons Giraffe Rig, which does a fair amount of damage to Hawlucha, but ultimately has no answers for Umbreon, who wins the fight 2 turns later. With the first totem defeated, the level cap becomes 16, and we get some more encounters from Verdant Cavern, Route 3, which we end up failing to catch because Rachel forgot her Drapion had Iron Barbs, Melee Meadow, and Seaward Cave. We soon after fight the rival again and have some kind of scary moments as I navigate around his type Null knowing Pursuit, Dan plays Among Us, and Rachel decides to use Mega Steelix against Darmanitan. But we manage and head towards the first Kahuna, Hala. Rachel's battle goes pretty well outside of her once again almost getting Mega Steelix killed. She finishes the fight without any deaths. Meanwhile, in my fight, Hala leads with Vanillux, which isn't too difficult for Magearna to handle. He then goes to Watchog, who should have this as his moveset, but somehow he ends up using Low Kick. I have no idea how it knows this move, but I decide to swap to Vileplume so I can figure out what its moveset actually is. Turns out, every other move is the same except Bite, which for whatever reason is replaced by Low Kick. Knowing this, I swap to Chandelure knowing Watchog can't touch it. It's at this point where I know the AI will swap since it has no moves to hit with. I debate between using Hex or Flame Burst on the swap, but ultimately decide to use Flame Burst just in case it's a Dark type. Unfortunately, I gamble wrong and Archon comes out, who resists Flame Burst. I don't want to risk Chandelure, so I swap to Ferroseed hoping it can two-shot with Metal Claw, but Archon begins setting up Double Team.
Quick Claw Ferroseed? Oh, he was almost a hero.
So
Quick Claw Ferroseed Part 2? Oh, he missed. Oh! God dang, man!
Yeah, the reason it did that much damage was because it had Rivalry for its ability. But in the moment, I don't know that. I ultimately decide that since it's low on health and has evasion, it's probably best to go to Quilava, who has Feint Attack. There's just one problem.
You can live this, come on, you can live it, you can live it, you can live it, you can live it, you can live it! No, he ate my berry! Oh, Lord! Oh, no! Oh, it's Jover, dude! Quilava's doomed!
No!
Well, that backfired. Looking back, I should have just sacked something to get Quilava in safely. Now faced with a hard choice, I decide to sack Quilava and get off a smokescreen against Archon as it dies to an Overkill Z move. I swap to Magearna, knowing I just have to hit and this thing is dead. Archon sets up Double Team and I miss on the first turn. Archon then uses Pluck as Magearna finally lands a Psybeam and finishes off Archon. That brings us to Dan's fight. Hala leads with Magearna, and Dan immediately finds himself in a hole as he makes 2 bad swaps to start the battle. He then turns to his type Null, who immediately gets confused and hits itself. It snaps out next turn and desperately tries to whittle it down with Tackle. Magearna starts doing questionable things, and Oricorio swoops in to finish it off with Air Cutter. The next Pokemon sent out is Rampardos, and that means it knows Pursuit. It's during this time that I lose to a Lava, which presents Dan an opportunity. Soul-Link Pokemon are allowed to finish the battle before they officially become dead. So Dan uses Oricorio to spam Growl and lower Rampardos' attack. Unfortunately, it uses Focus Energy, so now it has a 50% chance of bypassing those debuffs. But something interesting happens. Every time Rampardos uses the move Takedown, the game says the move is not very effective against Oricorio. Dan doesn't notice this, but this means Rampardos has the ability Aerolate, turning Takedown into a flying type move and boosting its damage by 20%. Eventually Oricorio does fall to Rampardos, but it manages to get a lot of damage off, putting Rampardos into kill range. Hawlucha comes in, and Dan uses Roost to get his HP up before the last Pokemon swaps in. But Dan mistakes the normal damage roll for being a crit, when in reality, it's just because the move is super effective. So Dan makes a huge mistake of not just killing Rampardos with Karate Chop, and instead...
Okay. I'm not gonna speak yet.
Oh, what the fuck?
Oh no.
Why was that super effective against me?
Oh my... Wait a minute. What?
That was that Full House.
Excuse me?
What a way to find out if it has refrigerate or something.
A brutal loss. Salazzle swaps in to finish off Rampardos, and the final Pokemon Jumpluff has nothing to hit Salazzle with and falls to Dragon Rage. Our first 2 deaths of the run come to the same trainer. We lick our wounds and add 2 links to the team. Excadrill, Typhlosion, Chansey, and Golurk, Rhyhorn, Toucannon. We grab a bunch of TMs and 10 Carrot Hills in counter. Rachel almost loses Rhyhorn.
Rachel, why is Rhyhorn on red health?
Don't worry about it.
I am a little worried about it.
Did you use Rhyhorn against Azumarill?
Don't worry about it.
Rachel?
I don't want to talk about it.
And we make our way to the next island. At this point, we unlock Mantine Surfing, a minigame where you launch off waves and perform tricks for points. Your score at the end awards you with beach points. Since this minigame doesn't require risking any Pokemon, we decided to save time by allowing ourselves to hack in infinite BP. This means the move tutors and items can be bought as many times as we want. All the move tutor moves, just like the TMs, are randomized, so we go through the list of options and equip ourselves for the upcoming journey ahead. We get enough totem stickers to get our first totem Pokemon. All the totem Pokemon given to us by Professor Oak falls under Statics Clause, so we can get them independent of the 1 encounter per area rule. The first totem Pokemon ends up being Brionne, Zvilus, Slurpuff. We decide to replace Brionne, Drapion, Flabebe, and make our way over to Route 4 and get a Great Link. We decide to keep this link in the box for now with the intention of putting it on later down the road. We fight Hau in Paniola Town and beat him without any difficulties. Then we get encounters from Paniola Ranch, the Daycare Eggs, and Route 5, before taking on Gladion and quickly disposing of his team on our way to the second totem. The trial Pokemon end up being complete jokes, and we head straight into the second totem fight against Totem Clink, Zubat, and Ammonite. Rachel one-shots Totem Zubat with Palkia's Power Gem. My Magearna sets up Doom Desire as Clink summons Oricorio. I decide to swap into Excadrill and use Dig to finish off Clink, then swap to Brionne, who Encore locks Oricorio into Helping Hand and wins the fight with Aqua Jet. Dan uses Steel Wing on Ammonite despite Crabhammer doing more than double what Steel Wing does because of the rain, and Ammonite returns the same damage back as it summons Magus Salamence to the field. Dan swaps to Slurpuff and takes a lot of damage from the gang attack, so he swaps back to Type Null, who immediately gets flinched the next turn. In danger of overswapping, Dan decides to send an Umbreon and get off Baby Doll Eyes to offset some of the incoming damage from Salamence. He then switches in Blissey to get Barrier up and heal himself to chip away at them. but the damage is too much and Blissey eventually flinches. With the situation becoming more dire, Toucannon is used as a sack Pokemon to get some damage in and safely swap to Salazzle, who finishes off Salamence with Dragon Rage. Ammonite does still have another summon, but he only will call them when his health reaches a certain threshold. So Dan uses this to get Blissey back on the field, heal it to full, and set up before Ammonite brings in Avalugg. With Blissey at +6 defense, Avalugg falls and Ammonite follows shortly after. We put on Latias, Gourgeist, Gliscor to fill the hole in our team, pick up our Brooklet Hill and Paniola Town encounters, and fail to catch the Route 6 encounter since Braviary set up a bunch of Hone Claws causing Dan to flee. We head over to Royal Avenue where everyone prepares for a really annoying fight. Now, some people may rule that this fight shouldn't count, but since this is supposed to be a hardcore run, we count it. In this fight, you and 3 other trainers bring one Pokemon to fight in a free-for-all style Pokemon battle. Once a Pokemon faints, the battle ends at the turn's conclusion. This can be really bad if you match up poorly with the other 3 Pokemon, or if you get gang attacked every turn. Rachel somehow manages to eliminate all 3 trainers with Palkia's Core Enforcer. Dan targets Dustox with his Gliscor to end the fight on the first turn. And Magearna gets pit against the Psychic-type squad as everyone struggles to do damage to one another.
Everyone please attack Meowstic. I'm begging you, please attack Meowstic. Everyone. Let's all team up. Okay, everyone's a hater. Future Sight, Psybeam, and Confusion. I see where it is. Frick y'all, the Meowstic is dead. No thanks to you scumbags. Everyone just made a pact with Meowstic that we just weren't going to attack.
Finally, the battle ends without any of us losing our Pokemon. At this point, we unlock a new shop in Royal Avenue that allows us to buy ability capsules and leftovers with battle points, which is interchangeable with beach points. So we stock up and get our Route 7 and Wellow Volcano Park encounters before heading up to fight the 3rd Totem. The trial Pokemon ends up putting Dan Salazzle to sleep, but they don't do much else to us as we go up against Totem Diancie, Totem Bonsly, and Totem Unpheasant. Rachel's Palkia does a lot to Bonsly on turn 1, but it manages to survive and summon Thundurus. Thundurus uses Swagger on Palkia to confuse it, but Rachel breaks through and drops Bonsly before getting past Confusion again to take down Thundurus the next turn. Dan is forced to swap to type Null with his Salazzle being asleep. Unpheasant lowers his defense as it uses its only summon on a Blitzel. Dan takes down Blitzel first and swaps into Gliscor to get a burn with Sacred Fire, where the battle is pretty much won from there despite a bit of roost stalling from Unpheasant. Magearna sets up Doom Desire as Diancie wastes little time revealing its ability.
Isn't something annoying. Rhodian? Oh my god.
But Diancie and the summoned Giraffere can't do anything to Magearna, and it slowly takes out Diancie with a second Doom Desire. From there, Excadrill finishes the Giraffere and Totem 3 has been conquered. We use the newly acquired Charizard Ride Pokemon to fly back to Melemele Island, where we get encounters from Melemele Sea, which Rachel kills, and Kala Ibe. We get the remaining TMs from here as well before flying back to Akala Island for our Dividing Peak Tunnel and Route 8 encounters. It's now time for us to shift our focus to the 4th Totem. We go up against Totem Mudbray, Totem Snubbull, and Totem Toxicroak. Rachel starts the battle by making a bad play. She swaps out Palkia because Snubbull is a Fairy type, even though it doesn't learn a Fairy type attack until level 37. She then swaps out of Typhlosion for Gourgeist when she sees Barbaracle get summoned. Rachel smartly steals Snubbull's +2 speed, but Barbaracle prevents her from swapping with Clamp. With no other option, Rachel attempts to kill the Snubbull with Spectral Thief, needing to hit a 7 in 16 chance damage roll to do so.
Yes, okay.
She succeeds, and Barbaracle goes down next turn to Razor Leaf. Dan attempts to set up Coil on turn 1 while Toxicroak swaggers Gliscor to confuse it before summoning in Cloyster. Dan wisely decides not to play the confusion game and sends in Salazzle instead. Salazzle gets in a good amount of damage before Dan swaps for Type Null. Type Null gets hit hard by Revenge, but thankfully is able to score the KO next turn with Extreme Speed. Blissey finishes the fight by burning the Cloyster with Sacred Fire and slowly reducing Cloyster's health until it's gone. I lead with Magearna against Totem Mudbray. I swap to Latias as Mudbray does big damage and summons Alolan Rattata to the field. Rattata knows Pursuit, so I have to be careful how I want to play this. Latias unfortunately does not outspeed Mudbray, but it does outspeed Rattata, so I decide to use Charm on Rattata to cover Latias on a swap to Vileplume. But Vileplume gets its defense lowered by Rattata's Crunch, meaning I could lose Vileplume depending on the damage range Mudbray and Rattata get. With no other Pokemon to safely swap into, I decided to risk it.
It's gonna hurt. And he outsped. And that's dead. Oh, dang it.
Despite having favorable odds to survive the turn, Mudbray and Rattata do just enough to take down Vileplume. To be fair, even if he had survived the turn, I probably still would have had to sack it to give myself the best chance. But getting some damage off first would have been nice. I swapped to Brionne, as it can do big damage to Mudbray if it can get off Bubble Beam. Sadly, the Mudbray and Rattata hit some high rolls again, and now Brionne, with its back against the wall, needs to come up big on this next turn. It's gonna take a miracle.
Speed boost. Defense boost, that's good.
That's actually kind of big.
Brionne's ability gives exactly what it needs to drastically increase its chance to survive the turn. Barring a crit or flinch, it can finish off Mudbray with Bubble Beam.
Got
Ah,
Moody.
A
come
really
on.
good chance to survive.
Come on. No crit. You live this.
Come on.
Moody coming in clutch.
Ooh, okay. Well, the Mudbray's off the field, no innards out. Good. Okay.
Okay, alright.
This is totally winnable.
And just like that, Totem Mudbray is defeated. I swap to Magearna to finish off Rattata, and Brionne proves itself as a more than capable teammate. We get our encounter for Lush Jungle and decide to put it on the team to replace Vileplume. We get another Totem Pokemon, get Diglett Tunnel's encounter, and make our way through to get Route 9's encounter. We also fail to catch Coney City's encounter because Dan forgot to catch it. We buy some more TMs and get Memorial Hill and Akala Outskirts encounter, which Rachel has to run from because Kyurem is really strong. We fight Plumeria, who spams Swagger on me with her Crocodile, but otherwise get past her with ease. Before we fight the second Kahuna, we sub out the Drampa Link in favor of Shiftry, Megaladius, and Lumineon, just so I can actually have an answer to ground types. Jumping into the second Kahuna fight against Olivia, she sends out Carablast against my Shiftry with Intimidate. I switch to Magearna as Carablast does pathetic damage with Fury Cutter. I start setting up coils against Carablast until I'm at +6 defense. Olivia decides to waste a Super Potion on Carablast as it faints a few turns later. Crawdon comes in next and uses its Z move, which does little damage as Magearna blasts through Crawdon with a couple of Aurora Beams and Doom Desire. Archeops is the last Pokemon, and with this site being all too familiar to another Kahuna fight, Magearna shows no mercy as it avenges our fallen ally once again. In Rachel's fight, she leads with Palkia against Olivia's Baneri. She proceeds to one-shot it with Core Enforcer, two-shot the incoming Licky Tongue with the same move, and uses Typhlosion to torch the last Pokemon, Oddish. Dan leads with Gliscor against Olivia's Tentacool. He chooses to stay in, which ends up being a good call as he recovers most of the damage he takes from Bubble Beam with the move Horn Leech. He KOs the Tentacool on turn 2, and Olivia sends out Gabite. Gabite sets up Sandstorm as Gliscor uses Coil to two-shot Gabite with Horn Leech, and two-shot the final Pokemon Cubone as well. With that over with, it was time to head over to Hano Grand Beach to get a new encounter and take a boat to visit Aether Paradise. The Ultra Beast encounter ends up being a little scary for Rachel, but we get through it and find ourselves on Ula Ula Island. Immediately we get enough totem stickers for another totem Pokemon. Then we shop for some TMs, and fight Hao and his 5 Pokemon soon after. Hao leads with his starter Gothitelle, so I lead with my Shiftry to completely wall it and defeat it in 3 attacks. Amora comes in, so I swap to Magearna, which easily tanks the incoming damage as Doom Desire shreds through it. Against his main Manectric, I use Shiftry to Intimidate and Excadrill to easily defeat him with Dig. You might be noticing a theme as Shiftry comes back in to intimidate Yungoos before swapping back to Excadrill and beating it 2 turns later. The last Pokemon is Abomasnow, who swiftly loses to Excadrill's Metal Claw. Rachel leads with Megaladius against Darmanitan. She swaps to Palkia for a better matchup, and Darmanitan tries to set up Belly Drum but fails to make an impact as Rachel KOs the following turn. Rachel one-shots the Absol with a Core Enforcer crit, and follows it up with another one-shot against Sandygast. Swalot breaks the cycle as Rachel has to click the button an additional time to KO it. And the last Pokemon, Primal Groudon, has no answers for Palkia even when its Encore locked into something that doesn't do super effective damage. Dan leads with Gliscor as he goes for Coil, but gets stopped in his tracks by Chatot taunt. Dan starts a carousel of swaps as Chatot shows off Chatter's 100% chance to confuse. Eventually he goes to Blissey, knowing it's built to take special hits, and it doesn't have a lot of attack to do that much damage to itself when it is confused. Eventually Blissey defeats Chatot, and Hau goes to Metang. Dan stays in with Blissey, which proves to be a double-edged sword as Blissey takes a ton of damage from Metang, but Metang receives a ton of recoil damage back. He swaps to Gliscor, who gets hit by Takedown pretty hard, but manages to beat Metang with Sacred Fire. Gliscor heals itself up a bit with Horn Leech against Surskit, but then his next Pokemon swaps in.
I think the
Latias.
part in the video is a Necrozma using a rock-type Z move or something.
Well, I'm glad I didn't coil up a bunch, because this thing has
Imposter?
Dan tries to use his ability Battle Armor to fall back on and get some defense buffs with Coil. Unfortunately, Spy Score over here has the same idea. Dan uses Horn Leech for some reason as Spy Score starts utilizing Dan's own set like a god. They both start fishing for burns with Sacred Fire, and Dan's Gliscor ends up getting burnt first. Between Spy Score's extra coils it set up earlier and the burn damage, Dan lets Gliscor faint to get someone else in safely. Dan chooses Slurpuff and risks a 9 and 16 damage range as Spy Score goes for 1,000 waves.
Don't kill me, 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 don't kill me. Okay.
It fails to kill, and Slurpuff is able to finish it off with a Roar Beam. The final Pokemon ends up being Torterra. Dan swaps to Umbreon, who, ironically, crits and burns with Sacred Fire on the first turn and wins the fight right after. We put the Drampa link back on again, but immediately find a better link with our next encounter from Malier Garden. We put that link on over the Drampa one, and the use of an ability capsule reveals that Noctowl has huge power for its ability. We follow up that encounter with another great encounter from Route 10. We opt to save this link for later, when Dan and Rachel are able to fully evolve them, as I already have a shiny stone to evolve Togetic with when the time comes. Our Route 11 and Malier City encounters end up being not as good, but we head out towards Mount Hakulani to get ready for the next Totem.
No!
Uh-oh. That's
No!
Innards out!
No! No way! That's the first death Rachel has! It's just
There's
fly,
nothing you can do
man!
about that, Rachel. That sucks.
That happened. Rachel's first death of the run comes to an unfortunately timed ability. Well, rest in peace my Noctowl set that I never got to use. We get a decent Mount Hakulani encounter and put that on the team before heading over to the observatory for our next totem fight. The trial Pokemon once again pose no issue. The same can't be said about the puzzle for this trial though.
Or do I want to leave with Shift Tree for Intimidate?
Wait, did I not do it right?
No. You have to do a Z is what you're trying to make.
Oh, a Z. Okay.
Oh, okay. That's not it, I guess. It has to be the other way. I'm dumb.
The totem ends up being Serena, Gulpin, and Whimsicott. Rachel does big damage against Totem Gulpin with Palkia's Core Enforcer, but it lives, gets off a stockpile, and summons Landorus. Rachel decides to take out the Landorus first as it sets up Swords Dance and Palkia almost one-shots it with Water Pulse while Gulpin heals itself with Swallow. Landorus uses Extra Sensory and Palkia finishes it off with another Water Pulse as Gulpin uses Sludge Bomb and calls for another ally, Chikorita. Palkia uses Core Enforcer 2 more times and both Chikorita and the Gulpin faint simultaneously. Dan leads with Xurkitree against Totem Whimsicott. Whimsicott uses Mega Drain as Xurkitree retaliates with Air Slash on turn 1, which does big damage and uses up Whimsicott's Citrus Berry. Whimsicott summons Nincada, and Dan proceeds to eliminate Whimsicott with another super effective Air Slash. He then purposefully weakens Nincada before killing it, just in case it has innards out for its ability. I lead with Necrozma Duskmane against Totem Serena. Serena uses Stomp and gets the flinch as it summons Stoutland. Since Stoutland knows Crunch, I decide to swap to Shift Tree to get Intimidate off and tank the incoming damage, as Serena also boosts Stoutland's special defense. I swap back to Necrozma, then to Shift Tree, then use Fake Out to get some damage in. I swap to Magearna as Serena uses Teeter Dance and the Stoutland hits itself in confusion. I swap back to Shiftry for more Intimidate and Fake Out support, then go to Magearna to start attacking this arena. After a couple more swaps and confusion shenanigans later, Magearna gets off Doom Desire and destroys it 2 turns later. Then Stoutland suffers the same fate as Totem 5 is behind us. We have our first fight with Guzma, who has nothing of note outside of a Zygarde complete, who normally would be terrifying for my team to handle, but in comes Shiftry to shake off the ground type attacks and clap back with multiple Leaf Blades to get the job done. We get a Route 12 encounter and Ula Ula Beach encounter, then visit the move tutors to get even stronger. We get encounters from Blush Mountain, Route 13, Tapu Village, and Route 15, before striking gold with our Route 14 and Mount Lanakila encounters. Dan's Pelipper gets Lightning Rod for its ability, and Rachel's Slowking gets Sap Sipper for its ability, making them immune to attacks they would otherwise be weak against. We decide to put on Guzzlord Slowking Forretress and Genesect Arcanine Pelipper before heading towards the next Totem challenge. This Totem is the first one to have all of its stats boosted at the start of the battle. We make it through the trial and find ourselves face to face against Totem Elekid, Totem Hitmonlee, and Totem Minior. My fight ends up being a joke, as Guzzlord hides behind a substitute and heals itself with Wish as it slowly damages Elekid with Scald and Shadow Force until it becomes so fed up, it executes its own summoned Weasel before finally succumbing to the damage with Nidoking following soon after. Dan swaps to Forretress as Minior calls for Mothim. Dan tries to get a burn on Minior with Sacred Fire as everyone does little damage to each other. Then Minior decides to end the fight by blowing itself up, taking the Mothim with it and leaving Forretress as the sole survivor. Rachel leads with Palkia against Hitmonlee, doing pretty good damage as Hitmonlee uses Focus Energy to boost its crit rate to 50%. It summons Comfey, and Rachel opts to swap in Arcanine to deal with it. But she seems to overlook something. If I need to in a pinch.
So this thing knows self-destruct.
Oh no! Rachel just lost to Arcanine because of a crit. Hitmonlee wins the coin flip and kills Arcanine. Rachel swaps to Slowking, who absorbs a big hit from Hitmonlee before finishing him off with Confusion. Comfey can't do anything to Slowking thanks to Sap Sipper, and Rachel makes it through the battle without any further damage. We put on Togekiss, Porygon Z, Slaking, and get our Thrifty Megamart and Hyena Desert encounters. We evolve some of our party members with the new level cap before fighting Plumeria. Plumeria doesn't have anything scary, but Rachel attacks Wynot and thankfully it doesn't choose to use Mirror Coat, or else we would have lost our starters. We get an encounter from Route 16, Ula Ula Meadow, and Route 17. Then we cash in our totem stickers before heading over to Totem. The fights here aren't worth talking about, but we get a bunch more totem stickers that allows us to obtain the final totem Pokemon from Professor Oak. We go to fight Guzma. He leads with Kartana against my Shiftry. I swap to Magearna, who defeats it in 2 turns with Aurora Beam. I use his Quillfish to set up a bunch of coils on Togekiss, and spam Hurricane against his Quillfish and Raticate to win the battle. Rachel defeats Nidorino with Palkia's Earth Power, beats Masquerain with Palkia's Power Gem, and gets a free win against the final Pokemon Cosmoa. Dan Slaking survives a self-destruct from Guzma's Electrode. Slaking is then able to defeat Diggersby after a couple of Horn Leeches and Spiky Shields. The final Pokemon, Necrozma, isn't able to do a lot of damage to Slaking and eventually goes down after a couple of extreme speeds. We go to fight Gladion next. He leads with Ultra Necrozma against my Shiftry. I swap to Magearna and defeat it with 3 Aurora Beams. I swap to Togekiss on his Primarina, and after a lot of painful turns of being put to sleep constantly, I get off 2 coils and use Hurricane to defeat it and the incoming Decidueye. Rachel one-shots Cosmog with Palkia, and almost one-shots the following Farfetch'd who wimps out from the attack. She swaps to Mega Latias, who one-shots Vileplume and finishes off the Farfetch'd right after. Dan Slaking one-shots Mayim Jr., 2-shots Drowsy, and 2-shots the final Pokemon Gabite. Following this victory, we fight the 3rd Kahuna, Nanu. For the 2nd battle in a row, my opponent leads with Necrozma, this time Duskbane, as I lead with Togekiss. I swap to Magearna, but decide I should save Magearna for later if I need it, so I then swap for Guzzlord. Guzzlord sets up Substitute, keeps its HP up with Wish and Leftovers, and cruises to a victory over Necrozma. Guzzlord completes the sweep by using Scald on Torracat and Crunch on Mesprit to score the kills. Rachel leads with Palkia against Nanu's Genesect. Palkia and Genesect trade powerful blows as Rachel sends in Porygon Z to finish it off. Goldeen does a lot of damage to Porygon Z with a crit, but Porygon lives and hits back with Discharge, picking up the KO. Rachel then uses Hydreigon to one-shot the last Pokemon, Murkrow. Dan commits domestic crimes as he pits Slaking against Slackoth. He gets a bit of luck that Slackoth didn't decide to use Counter here, but scores the kill after Nanu wastes his Hyper Potion. Nanu's Desolate Land Golduck dies to 2 of Slaking's Horn Leeches. Slaking then uses Extreme Speed twice to beat Honchkrow, and the battle is over. Before we travel back to Aether Paradise, I offer to make a change to the team. Rachel's team is extremely weak against Fairy types, and with Rachel's best Steel types being lost in tragic ways, I decide to make a sacrifice. We replace the Necrozma Duskmane and Shiftry links in favor of Blissey, Mega Gyarados, Aggron, and Ledian, Metagross, Decidueye. Yeah, Ledian obviously isn't good, but it's not always about what the Pokemon on your team can do for you, but sometimes what it can do for the others around it. We get some TMs we missed earlier, and Dan gets sketched from one of them. Once we finish learning moves, we go back to Aether Paradise and defeat a whole bunch of easy trainers. The double battle with Faba isn't too bad despite Rachel getting paralyzed by Body Slam, and we make our way to fight Guzma. I lead with Togekiss against Guzma's Walrein. I set up 2 coils, then beat his Walrein with some good damage rolls from Hurricane. I defeat his Ivysaur with the same attack, and defeat his Mudsdale with Hurricane followed by Fleur Cannon. I swap to Magearna to beat his final Pokemon, Murkrow. Rachel burned her Porygon Z prior to the fight to activate its ability, Quick Feet. Porygon tears through Guzma's team until Jellicent uses Hex against it. Yep, that means Jellicent has Normalized for its ability. Rachel swaps to Hydreigon, who easily defeats Jellicent the next turn, and breaks through Rotom Wash to win the battle. Dan Slaking causes Guzma to swap into Magcargo to activate Sap Sipper. He then one-shots it with Thousand Waves the next turn. He uses Sandstream Aggron to defeat Minccino and Slurpuff, before swapping back to Slaking to finish Simisear and the battle. It's now time to shift focus to the Aether Paradise president, Lusamine. Rachel gets into a bit of a struggle match with her Porygon Z and Lusamine's Registeel. Eventually she swaps out to Metagross and makes a great play of stealing Registeel's +5 defense and +2 special defense. And she pretty much wins the battle from there as she one-shots Grovyle, 2-shots Metagross, 2-shots Walrein, and 3-shots Mantine. Dan Slaking pretty much rips through Lusamine's team on its own. Dan does swap to Aggron to defeat her Larvesta, but otherwise, it's a clean sweep of her team. Meanwhile, in my fight, Lusamine leads with Caterpie, and immediately I go to a Pokemon I haven't used yet, Ledian. You see, looking through the available TMs I had, Ledian was able to learn some extremely good ones. Ledian had access to moves like Tail Glow, Coil, and Agility. I use these moves to set up against Caterpie as all it can do is Bug Bite and Tackle me to no avail. But you might be wondering, what about the 4th move slot? Well, if you remember what I said earlier, you might already know. Yeah, Ledian obviously isn't good, but it's not always about what the Pokemon on your team can do for you, but sometimes what it can do for the others around it. The others around it. The others around it. The final move for the set, Baton Pass. With it, Ledian has obtained all 5 pieces of Exodia, allowing it to elevate any Pokemon I choose to astronomical levels of power. I use Baton Pass to send in Blissey. I set up Substitute as Blissey proceeds to mercilessly destroy each and every one of Lusamine's Pokemon. We get a whole bunch of TMs and get the encounter from Seafold Village, Pony Wilds, and the static Aerodactyl. We visit the final beach to set a new high score in Mantine Surfing to unlock the Surfing Pikachu static, which ends up being not worth the time. We then get encounters from Ancient Pony Path, Pony Breaker Coast, Executor Island, and Vast Pony Canyon. We slowly make our way through the cave as we fight a couple of veteran trainers along the way. Veteran Heather uses a Huntail against Dan that gets up 2 coils. Slaking overleveled from a previous battle, so Dan plans on using Slurpuff to take out Huntail. But Huntail decides otherwise.
Baton Pass?
Uh-oh.
Oh no!
Oh no.
He has Baton Pass?
Oh, it's Oddish. Oh, thank God.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Jesus.
Okay.
Thankfully, it goes to Oddish, and Dan's able to defeat it and the other Pokemon without any more drama. Veteran Eric is next. My Blissey just barely avoids overleveling against him. Meanwhile, Dan faces a belly drum Darmanitan. He decides to sack Slurpuff to let Darmanitan kill itself with Flare Blitz. The rest of the fight ends up being pretty mild as Dan's Aggron beats Mudkip and Moltres while Fortress handles Tangrowth. In Rachel's fight, her Palkia sweeps through Duat and Tailo, while Metagross beats Crabominable. That's when Honchkrow shows up. Rachel goes to Porygon Z. Rachel takes a lot of damage from Foul Play and decides to recover the damage. She then gets swaggered by Honchkrow and makes the worst possible decision to stay in. She not only hits herself in confusion, but also, since Foul Play uses the target's attack stat, Honchkrow hits her with twice as strong Foul Play because of the swagger attack boost from the last turn.
Porygon Z's dead.
Oh. No. No. It's Togekiss. It's even more sad because Hydreigon and Mega Gyarados were phenomenal counters for Honchkrow. Unsurprisingly, Hydreigon swaps in and finishes the Honchkrow. That was 2 big deaths right before the 7th Totem. Since the teams are becoming a bit unbalanced, we decide to let me pick one link and Dan pick another to fill the empty team slots. So the team now has Mega Pidgeot, Reuniclus, Chandelure, and Lopunny, Serperior, Zekrom. With our new team assembled, it's time to take on the 7th Totem. We face off against Totem Stuffle, Totem Mega Beedrill, and Totem Ledian. My plan going in was to use Mega Pidgeot's Spectral Thief to steal the Omni Boost from Stuffle, but since Stuffle is a normal type, I have to resort to Plan B. Mega Pidgeot uses Feather Dance to cripple Stuffle's attack as it goes for Double Edge. It summons Zora, and I decide to keep both Zora's and Stuffle's attack stat in check with Feather Dance while healing myself with Roost. The Stuffle spams Pain Split, which forces me to pivot swap between Magearna and Mega Pidgeot to prevent myself from running out of PP. Eventually, Stuffle runs out of PP for Pain Split, and Mega Pidgeot defeats Stuffle with Hurricane, then Magearna finishes off Zora. Dan uses Aggron to reverse Ledian's Omni Boost into an Omni Drop with the move Topsy-Turvy. Ledian summons Glalie, and Aggron one-shots Glalie with Meteor Mash, before doing the same to Ledian the next turn. Rachel has a bit of a rough time against Mega Beedrill. She uses Spectral Thief to steal Mega Beedrill's Omni Boost, but when Mega Beedrill summons Nidoking, Metagross one-shots Nidoking at the price of getting its HP reduced to a low amount by Mega Beedrill's Endeavor. Mega Beedrill summons Ariados next. Rachel once again defeats the summon in a single hit, but now is within kill range from Mega Beedrill's Fellstinger. She swaps to Palkia, who gets put down to low health by Endeavor, but this is the perfect setup. Now Mega Beedrill will select one of 2 moves. Either Endeavor because the AI is weird about fixed damaging moves, or Poison Jab because it has the highest effective base power. This means Metagross can get back in without worrying about a crit from Fellstinger. Mega Beedrill goes for Endeavor, which fails because Metagross has less health, and Leftovers puts Metagross just out of kill range from a crit. And it's a good thing, too.
Was that it was a crit. That was a crit. That was a crit.
And
God,
look at that.
bullshit.
We outplayed the frickin' crit. Look at that. Outplayed. Just outplayed. With Totem 7 behind us, we level up a little bit before tackling the first fight with Necrozma. Frogadier. Whoa! He turned into a piece of paper, you see that? This fight isn't too scary. Guzzlord easily walls Frogadier, Mega Gyarados one-taps Kadabra, and Dan uses his own Chandelure to defeat the inferior one. Necrozma isn't done, however, as we chase him down the wormhole for a much harder battle. The level cap is 55 right now, and Ultra Necrozma is a whopping 5 levels higher than that, plus he gets an Omni Boost to start the battle. This fight is terrifying, so we all make sure to slap a Focus Sash on our leads and hope for the best. Wait. Oh, look at that freaking Primpole, dude. Oh my god, look at Infernape! Dude, he's holding up the peace sign! What the fuck? He's doing something with his freaking... He's doing gang signs! I use Mega Pidgeot against Infernape. He traps me with Fire Spin before I steal the Omni Boost from him with Spectral Thief. I stall the duration of Fire Spin with Roost. Infernape does do a lot of damage with a crit punishment, but Mega Pidgeot is able to tank it, and I swap to Guzzlord to finish it off. Rachel uses Spectral Thief on Prinplup before finishing it off next turn with Horn Leech. Dan uses Topsy-Turvy on Rufflet and two-shots it with Meteor Mash. That was way easier than I expected it to be. We get our Ultra Beast from Soliera, and go back to Seafold Village to begin the final Totem trial. This trial is basically just a boss rush of a bunch of captains. I'll try to go through them as concisely as I can. First up is Mina. My Mega Pidgeot uses Feather Dance to lower Teddiursa's attack to -6. I swap to Magearna, who coils up to +6, then defeats Teddiursa with Boom Burst. I swap back to Mega Pidgeot to one-shot Chestnut with Hurricane, then use Guzzlord to wall the final Pokemon Blitzel. Rachel uses Sap Sipper Slowking to defeat Serena, then switches to Metagross to defeat Magearna with a couple of Meteor Mashes, and the last Pokemon, Shelder, with Metagross's Hornleech. Dan uses Aggron's Focus Sash to get Spore off on Zygarde. He swaps to Fortress and gets one attack off before Mina decides to swap to Graveler. Dan attempts to burn Graveler with Sacred Fire, but it doesn't work, and Dan eventually has to swap to Umbreon. It's here where Dan makes a great read, predicting Graveler will go for Explosion and switching to Decidueye, who's immune to it. Zygarde comes back in, and Dan creates a perfect pivot strategy, utilizing Decidueye's Spiky Shield to do damage, then swapping to Fortress, who has Regenerator to tank a hit, rinse repeat until Fortress gets enough health to safely fish for a burn. Zygarde goes down a couple turns later, and the final Pokemon, Wigglytuff, has nothing to hit Fortress with, and Dan wins the fight. The next captain is Alima. I use Alima's Clefairy to get in Ledian. You already know what's about to happen. Set up stat boosts, baton pass to Blissey, win the fight. Rachel two-shots Slack Off with Palkia, two-shots Beldum with Palkia, and uses her own Metagross to two-shot Alima's Mega Metagross. Dan goes to Zekrom and utilizes a set brought to you by the move Sketch, as he sets up to +6 with Quiver Dance and sweeps the whole team with a bunch of Oblivion Wings. Mallow is next. She leads with Cleffa against me. Ledian time. I do make a mistake letting Cleffa copycat my Tail Glow Agility and Baton Pass, but Litwick isn't too scary and I defeat it after it uses Curse. Lotad gets one shot by Boom Burst, and Cleffa goes down to Guzzlord. Rachel two-shots Hoopa Unbound with Mega Gyarados, one-shots Oricorio, and one-shots Igglybuff. Dan runs it back with Zekrom, getting to +6 and blasting through Mallow's team with Oblivion Wing. We then fight Kialwyn. Guzzlord easily beats Charizard, and Blissey handles Drampa and Finneon. Rachel one-shots Mothim, completely walls Mega Abomasnow with Sap Sipper Slowking, and Blossom doesn't fare much better. Kialwyn swaps out of Beware against Chandelure, and Dan ends up burning Mightyena. Mightyena eventually falls to Umbreon, and Chandelure comes back in against Beware to burn it. Kialwyn swaps to Landorus, and it does a lot of damage to Dan's Decidueye with a crit. But Decidueye still manages to get past it. Beware finally faints to Chandelure, and the fight ends. There's a battle with a hiker directly afterwards, but we win without issue and move on to the final captain, Sophocles. Sophocles leads with Seismitoad. Ledian sets up, Ledian baton passes, Blissey sweeps. Rachel uses Superior for the first time, as it Leech Seeds for Alligator before swapping to Mega Gyarados and one-shotting with Fusion Bolt. Rachel goes back to Superior to Leech Seed and Coil setup against Solgaleo. She then defeats Solgaleo in man-time with a few Leaf Blades. Dan puts Zebstrika to sleep before swapping in Zekrom to get off 6 Quiver Dances and sweep the team with Oblivion Wing. It's finally time to fight the last Totem. We end up getting Totem Altaria, Totem Totodile, and Totem Bergmite. This Totem gets a +2 in every stat. Rachel uses Spectral Thief to steal the +2, then one-shots Totodile and two-shots Umbreon. Dan uses Topsy-Turvy on Bergmite, and Bergmite summons Mega Ampharos. Dan uses Zekrom to set up some Quiver Dances, then takes out Bergmite first, and the Mega Ampharos right after. I use Ledian to Spectral Thief the +2. Altaria summons Reshiram, so I baton pass to Blissey. I decide to play very passively, as Altaria uses Perish Song. Since every turn, Reshiram has used Slash and Altaria has used Dragon Pulse, I decide to swap to Magearna as a result. But it went Fusion Flare. Why? Okay. Why did it go for Fusion Flare? Yeah, I don't know. Both Reshiram and Altaria die to Perish Song and the fight ends. Moving on, we go to fight the last Kahuna, Hapu. Magearna easily sets up a bunch of coils against Weepinbell, then proceeds to annihilate Weepinbell, Seal, and Lycanroc, before I swap to Ledian and baton passing Guzzlord to defeat Pyukumuku. Rachel uses Hornleech against Duat as it goes for Swords Dance. Rachel steals the stat boost and beats Duat the next turn. Metagross tanks a crit Thunderbolt from Helioptile, then kills and heals itself with Hornleech. Metagross one-shots Gramble and slowly chips away at Registeel. Dan attempts to sweep with Zekrom. As he goes for Quiver Dance against Pancham, Pancham uses Parting Shot and swaps to Manaphy. Dan continues to set up to +6. Then one-shots Manaphy and Pancham before being roared out by Mega Manectric. Dan uses Fortress to finish off Mega Manectric, then goes back to Zekrom to defeat the final Pokemon Electabuzz. Gladion challenges us right before starting the trek to the Elite Four. I go to Ledian against Ribombee. I'm only able to get off a single Tail Glow before I baton pass to Blissey. Blissey 2-shots Ribombee, 2-shots Jirachi, then gets into a stall match with its pre-evolution Chansey. Chansey eventually swaps out due to emergency exit, but Blissey takes out the incoming Unpheasant and Chansey to win the fight. Rachel one-shots Pidove with Metagross, then swaps to Palkia to one-shot Magcargo. She swaps back to Metagross to one-shot Sylveon, then swaps to Mega Gyarados to defeat Sharna. Dan does a fair amount of damage to Alolan Golem with Aggron, before Gladion switches it out for Binacle. Dan uses Zekrom to set up a bunch of Quiver Dances, then sweeps through his team with Oblivion Wing. We dodge most of the trainers in Victory Road, and wind up at the final fight before the Elite Four. The duo use Trubbish and Solrock against my Magearna and Guzzlord. Solrock sets up Wonder Room while I set up Sticky Web with Guzzlord and take the kill against Solrock with Magearna's Flash Cannon. Trubbish sets up Amnesia and Mega Caesar swaps in next. I swap Guzzlord for Blissey, and because of Sticky Web, Magearna is able to outspeed and one-shot Mega Caesar with Flamethrower. Trubbish continues to set up Amnesia. Magearna takes out Sunflora next turn, which means the rest of the fight is a 2v1. Unsurprisingly, Trubbish goes down easily, and Blaziken can't do much in retaliation. Rachel leads with Palkia and Metagross against Bronzor and Electric. Rachel double attacks into Electric as Bronzor does little damage with Payback. She double attacks Galvantula and Mismagius to secure the kills, and then works on the left side of the field, taking out Bronzor before finishing off the battle against Kyurem. Dan stares down a tricky situation as his Aggron and Zekrom face off against Mega Beedrill and Mudkip. Both Pokemon know Endeavor, and Mega Beedrill has a whopping 150 base attack stat, while Mudkip has maximized special attack boosted Hydro Pump. Dan swaps Aggron for Decidueye, and sets up a Quiver Dance with Zekrom while Mudkip and Beedrill do decent damage. Zekrom outspeeds and one-shots Mega Beedrill with Oblivion Wing, as Decidueye protects itself against Mudkip's Hydro Pump. Malamar swaps in next, so Dan swaps Decidueye for Umbreon and does over half health damage to Malamar with Zekrom's Oblivion Wing. He tanks the incoming attacks and defeats Malamar next turn before shifting focus to the right side and methodically taking down Mudkip, Jellicent, and Armaldo to win the battle. Officially, there are just 5 trainers who stand between us and a successful run. We reorganize our moves before heading up the mountain to determine our ultimate fate. The first member of the Elite Four is Kahili. She leads with Fennekin against my Mega Pidgeot. I decide to use Blissey to PP stall Fennekin's Fire Blast. Once it runs out, I swap to Ledian to get off a bunch of stat buffs before baton passing into Blissey. Blissey one-shots Fennekin, Azumarill, and Dugtrio, and has to use 2 attacks to take out the bulky Zygarde complete before finishing the sweep with a one-shot on Quagsire. Kahili's Cloyster sets up spikes as Rachel does a ton of damage to it with Metagross's Psychic. Kahili full restores, and Rachel crits and one-shots right after. She swaps to Superior against Furfrou. Rachel misses Leech Seed twice, but thankfully Furfrou plays pretty passive and allows Rachel time to get it up on the 3rd try. Rachel then swaps to Reuniclus to put it to sleep and deal big damage with Psychic. Volbeat comes in next. Rachel gets off Yawn and then swaps to Palkia to 2-shot with Power Gem. Kahili then sends out Mega Blaziken, but hilariously, it doesn't know a fire or fighting type move, which means Metagross can swap in safely and shut it down with Psychic. Her last Pokemon, Pidgeotto, can't do much to Rachel's Mega Gyarados, and it goes down to 2 crunches. Dan leads with Aggron against Persian. He puts Persian to sleep and goes to Zekrom to sub and Quiver Dance before one-shotting Persian, Trubbish, Vanillish, Basculin, and Deoxys attack. The second Elite Four member is Olivia. I lead with Mega Pidgeot against her Mega Ampharos. I swap to Blissey for its special bulk prowess, and Blissey successfully keeps itself healthy while it chips away at Mega Ampharos. Wailord comes in next. I stay in with Blissey to fish for a burn with Searing Shot, but it fails, and I swap to Guzzlord to continue walling it and defeat it with Crunch. Olivia goes to Marowak. I PP stall Marowak's Endeavor, and Marowak defeats itself with Flare Blitz Recoil. Duwak comes out, and I go to Mega Pidgeot to counter its attempts to set up Swords Dance with Feather Dance. Eventually, Mega Pidgeot lands 2 Hurricanes to finish Duat, and Guzzlord is able to easily defeat the final Pokemon, Simisear. Rachel leads with Palkia against Olivia's Phantump. Palkia one-shots Phantump with Core Enforcer. He two-shots the incoming Pineco with the same move, and switches into Superior against Olivia's Guzzlord. She sets up Leech Seed, and recovers an insane amount of health each turn. This lets her set up 6 coils, and once Guzzlord faints to Leech Seed, Superior is able to two-shot Zebstrika and one-shot Drowsy. Dan uses Aggron to set up Spore on Pediursa. He swaps to Zekrom and sets up his standard 6 Quiver Dances with Substitute to one-shot Teddiursa and Goomy. Plusle takes a couple of Oblivion Wings, but Zekrom eventually breaks through and two-shots Jirachi and Victini to win the fight. The third Elite Four member is Acerola. I lead with Mega Pidgeot against Chestnut. I decide to reduce Chestnut's attack with Feather Dance, then PP stall Chestnut's Body Slam, and send in Ledian for the usual setup and Baton Pass, this time going into Guzzlord. Guzzlord gets past Chestnut, then one-shots Golurk, Necrozma Duskmane, Persian, and two-shots the last Pokemon, Golisopod. Rachel leads Metagross against Acerola's Jangmo-o. Both Pokemon set up Dragon Dance on turn 1, and Rachel uses Spectral Thief to steal the stat boost and defeat Jangmo-o the next turn. Metagross one-shots Lycanroc with Meteor Mash, then two-shots Caesar with Spectral Thief. Rachel swaps to Sapsipper Slowking to take out Serena with Sludge Wave, and Sunflora takes itself out with Double Edge. Dan faces off against Cosmog as Acerola's lead Pokemon. Since Cosmog doesn't know an attack, Dan effortlessly gets in Zekrom to start the easiest sweep of the run. He one-shots Cosmog and Cubchoo, two-shots Nidoqueen, who also had innards out, one-shots Tropius, and one-shots Nidoran. The final Elite Four member is Mullane. Mega Pidgeot and Rowlet exchange Feather Dances, and Magearna swaps in to coil up and take out Rowlet with Flamethrower. Magearna takes out Pachirisu after a lot of Flamethrowers and Flash Cannons. I swap to Guzzlord to take out Fomantis, and swap to Mega Pidgeot to one-shot Jangmo-o and Mothim with Hurricane. Rachel one-shots Scatterbug with Palkia's Power Gem. Rachel swaps to Metagross against Latias, and tanks a Z-move before getting off some Dragon Dances and two-shotting Latias with Spectral Thief. She swaps to Mega Gyarados against Pansear, and sets up some Dragon Dances before one-shotting Pansear, Yungoos, and Oricorio. Dan leads with Aggron against Mullane's Buzzwole. He swaps to Chandelure and takes out Buzzwole with a combination of Flame Burst and Sandstorm. Dan swaps to Zekrom against Tapu Fini. He sets up his Quiver Dances and Substitute, then two-shots Tapu Fini, one-shots Nidoqueen, who had innards out again, and one-shots Mienshao along with Natu. For the final challenge to claim ourselves as champion and deem the Nuzlocke as a victory, we face off against the final trainer standing in our way. How? I lead with Blissey against Swanna. I spam Soft Boiled as I anticipate Swanna going for Brave Bird. After Swanna sets up Rain Dance and Tailwind, it finally attacks with Brave Bird and does massive damage to itself with Recoil. I set up Substitute on the turn How uses a full Restore, and Blissey takes out Swanna with 2 Boom Bursts, and it does a small amount of damage with innards out. Rachel swaps to Metagross against How's Granbull. She misses Meteor Mash and takes a lot of damage from Granbull's Payback. Thankfully, next turn she manages to land Meteor Mash and scores the kill. Dan faces off against a Mega Tyranitar lead. He swaps to Decidueye on Earthquake and gets some damage in with Spiky Shield. He uses Fortress to take a Crunch and Dark Pulse from Tyranitar, and starts pivot swapping between Umbreon and Regenerator Fortress to try and PP stall Tyranitar. He takes some unnecessary risks with a potential Dark Pulse crit, but thankfully it never hits the 1 in 24 chance, and Dan swaps into Zekrom once Tyranitar is out of Earthquake to get off all his buffs. Mega Tyranitar eventually runs out of PP in all his moves, and Hao swaps out to Mega Abomasnow, who immediately gets destroyed by Zekrom's Oblivion Wing. Blissey two-shots Chikorita with Searing Shot and Boom Burst. Rachel swaps to Slowking against Darmanitan Zen. Slowking tanks a Z-move and does a lot of damage with Water Spout. Eventually Hao swaps out Darmanitan Zen in favor of Gourgeist. Rachel pivot swaps between Mega Gyarados and Sapsipper Slowking to deal with Seed Bomb and Phantom Force. After a lot of pain split spamming from Gourgeist, she puts Gourgeist to sleep with Yawn and takes it out with Slowking's Psychic. Dan continues his sweep with a one-shot Oblivion Wing on Pancham. I also one-shot Snover with Blissey's Searing Shot. Rachel sets up Yawn against Rhydon as it misses Mega Horn on the first turn. Rachel for some reason stays in and pays the price. The first death in the Elite Four. We will remember you, Sapsipper Slowking. Rachel gets her revenge against Rhydon by one-shotting it with Palkia's Water Pulse. Dan once again one-shots Dewpider with Oblivion Wing. Blissey takes out Glalie with a couple of Searing shots. Rachel defeats Darmanitan Zen with a couple of hits from Palkia's Water Pulse. Dan defeats Spinarak with Oblivion Wing. Gothitelle sets up Z Magic Room as I set up Sub and heal to full next turn. I swap to Ledian to get off Agility and Tail Glow, then Baton Pass to Magearna. Magearna two-shots Gothitelle with Flash Cannon. Rachel one-shots Lotab with Palkia's Core Enforcer, and Dan one-shots Quagsire with Zekron's Oblivion Wing. As we face down the last Pokemon, we try to set up the game-winning turn at the same time.
3, 2, 1. Go.
Fleur Cannon!
Oblivion
Crunch.
Wing!
I really didn't outspeed this thing?
Mine didn't die. However, he's struggling himself to death. Oh, he's full restoring.
Core Enforcer is such a long
Everyone
move.
just pretend that this was at the same time.
And he killed himself with struggle.
Pretty
Yes!
close.
And with that, we managed to overcome all of Alola's trials and challenges as we officially beat our hardcore Soul Link. We went from not being able to defeat the teacher and captain fights to beating the entire game in the span of 4 attempts. Maybe we'll do another Soul Link later down the road. But for now, let's commemorate this run with some superlatives and stat summaries. Wait, we can't end this video on a sad note. How about ending it with a completely unserious tier list instead? This will be for every encounter we got during our adventure, whether we caught them or not.
That's why he's the GOAT!
Hey, that's pretty good. Hey,
I mean, it's alright,
that's pretty
like-
good.
I mean,
It's the biggest
alright,
piece of
like-
dog shit.
Hey,
it's alright,
that's pretty
like-
good. Hey,
I mean, it's alright,
that's pretty
like-
good. Hey, that's pretty good.
I mean,
It's the biggest
alright,
piece of
like-
dog shit.
Hey,
it's alright,
that's pretty
like-
good. Hey,
I mean, it's alright,
that's pretty
like-
good. Hey,
It's the biggest
that's
piece
pretty
of dog
good.
shit.
Hey, that's pretty good. Hey,
It's the biggest
pretty
piece of dog
good.
shit.
Trash. I mean,
It's the biggest
alright,
piece of
like-
dog shit.
I mean, it's alright, like.
Hey, that's pretty good. Hey,
It's the biggest
that's
piece
pretty
of dog
good.
shit.
Hey,
It's the biggest
alright,
piece of
like-
dog shit.
Know your
It's the
fucking
biggest
place.
piece of dog shit.
Trash.
Hey,
I mean, it's alright,
that's pretty
like-
good.
My carrot's alright.
That's pretty good.
Trash man.
Hey,
It's the biggest
that's
piece
pretty
of
good.
dog shit.
Trash.
Hey,
it's alright,
that's pretty
like-
good. Hey,
It's the biggest
that's
piece
pretty
of dog
good.
shit. It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
Hey,
It's the biggest
alright,
piece of
like-
dog shit.
I mean,
It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
They don't call me cheap.
It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
hey,
it's alright,
that's
like-
pretty good. Hey,
It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
I mean, it's
Know your
alright,
fucking
like-
place. Trash.
I mean,
It's the biggest
alright,
piece of
like-
dog shit.
I mean,
It's the biggest
alright,
piece of
like-
dog shit.
Hey,
It's the biggest piece
that's
of
pretty
dog shit.
good.
Know your fucking place. Trash.
I mean,
It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
Hey, that's pretty good. Hey,
alright,
that's
like-
pretty good.
Know your fucking place. Trash.
Hey, that's pretty good. Hey,
Know your
alright,
fucking
like-
that's
place.
pretty good.
Trash.
Hey,
It's the biggest
that's
piece
pretty
of dog
good.
shit.
Know your
It's the
fucking
biggest
place.
piece of dog shit.
Trash.
I mean, it's alright, like. That's why it's the
Hey,
It's the biggest
that's
piece of
pretty
dog
good.
shit. It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
Hey,
it's alright,
that's pretty
like-
good. Hey, that's pretty good. Hey, that's pretty good. Hey,
it's alright,
that's
like-
pretty good. Hey,
it's alright,
that's
like-
pretty good. Hey,
It's the biggest piece
that's
of
pretty
dog
good.
shit.
I mean, it's alright, like.
Hey,
it's alright,
that's
like-
pretty good.
I mean, it's alright, like.
Hey,
it's alright,
that's
like-
pretty good. Hey, that's pretty good. Hey,
alright,
that's
like-
pretty good. Hey,
It's the biggest
alright,
piece
that's
of
like-
dog
pretty
shit.
good. Hey,
it's alright,
that's
like-
pretty good.
I mean, it's alright, like.
Hey,
Know your
It's the
fucking
biggest
place.
piece
pretty
of dog
good.
shit.
Trash.
Hey, that's pretty good. Hey,
it's alright,
that's
like-
pretty good. Hey,
it's alright,
that's
like-
pretty good. Hey, that's pretty good.
And congratulations, you made it to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed this style of video. I know it's very different from past content I've made for this channel. This video was much more of a passion project for challenge runs that I've done previously, and hopefully will continue doing in the future. It's possible I might even make more of these kind of videos, or even stream it, who knows, but thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, see you guys then. Bye.